Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I would like to have a conversation about Catalonia. I've been watching events that they've taken hold because I find this to be fascinating to watch. And it creates certain questions. It honestly does. It creates questions. You have a situation where a certain group of people in that country said, we want independence. Whatever the reasons, they said, we want independence. Now, the Spanish government itself says, whoa, and no. Now, if Texas said they wanted independence, the United States government will behave the exact same way. They would say, no, you can go fuck yourself. We're not breaking up this way. Every organization, government wants to persist itself. No government wants to rule over part of the government itself breaking up. Meaning that if Catalonia wants independence, it's going to do it against what the Spanish government wants. What does that mean? You have an intractable problem. You have a segment of your society that doesn't want to be a part of your society anymore. Yeah, for whatever reason. The reason could be good, bad, somewhere in between. But for whatever reason, they don't necessarily want to be a part of your society anymore. And their government voted to leave. Now, under the legal structure of their own government, meaning a group of people themselves create their own legal structure in the same way that larger groups of people create their own legal structure. The legal structure itself is not really real. It's something from the perspective of the people involved in that situation. Meaning, from the Spanish government's perspective, what took place in regards to the independence referendum wasn't legal. From the governments of Catalonia's perspective, it's perfectly legal. We've declared our independence. Now, what does it mean to declare your independence? And how do you protect that independence? Meaning, if I declare my independence, I need to be able to hold fast to the fact that we actually have that independence, and it won't necessarily be ripped away from us by a stronger power. Well, the Spanish government is saying no. And not just no, the Spanish government is saying, I am dissolving your government, I am dissolving your parliament, and I am taking over direct rule of your little area of the globe. Now, Catalonia has said they're going to resist this, but I am immensely curious as to how they're going to resist this. And I'm also immensely curious on what the Spanish government is willing to do in order to put them down and to suppress this uprising, this movement for independence. This should be immensely interesting. I love this guy's picture, by the way. It's like he is like, Catalonia! I love it. I love it. I love it. It's this gut-wrenching scream, freedom! Do you remember in Braveheart where they ripped what's the guy name? I can't think of his name. William Wallace. Maybe getting that wrong, but essentially Mel Gibson's character. They ripped him open, and the guy was on his deathbed, and he was dying. He wanted to see the breaking of Wallace before he died, the breaking of Mel Gibson before he died. And as he listened, and they ripped Mel Gibson open and they broke him, Mel Gibson screamed out, freedom! And the last word that guy heard was Mel Gibson screaming freedom at the top of his lungs. It was a good movie. It was a good movie. I find this something to be epic, man. I find this something to be immensely epic. In this case, we have a real world scenario of a population trying to break away for independence. And you're in this interesting quagmire of, should people be able to declare independence? Meaning, should a group of people who come together say, we want something different, should they be able to do it? And if so, what should the perspective of the government be that they're pulling themselves away from? And does that government have a vested interest in saying no? Well, answer to that is yes. Of course, the government is not necessarily going to want to be broken up. But how do you mend those fences? How do you square those circles? Because ultimately, they want independence. The government is going to say no, and you're going to bump heads over this point. How do you fix that? How do you fix that? The American colonies wants independence from Britain. How do you fix that? In that case, they fix it with a war. How far is Spain willing to go to take control of Catalonia? And how far is Catalonia willing to go to stop them from taking control of Catalonia? That's the brass tacks of this headbutt between these two. Let's read the story for a bit. It's interesting. This is The Guardian. Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont vows to resist Madrid. Madrid claimed direct rule of Catalonia for the first time in nearly 4 decades on Saturday, firing the regional government and police chief after a unilateral declaration of independence. But the deposed Catalan leader immediately vowed there will be peaceful resistance to the takeover. I'm skeptical. Hours after the Spanish government formally announced this dismissal and the replacement of the entire cabinet by counterparts hundreds of miles away, the Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, put on an ostentatious display of normality with lunch at a restaurant at the center of his hometown. As he toasted friends with red wine, posed for pictures with supporters in Girona, and enjoyed the applause from fellow diners, all broadcasts live on national television, a pre-recorded video message went out promising to continue to work to build a free nation. We must do so resisting repression and threats without ever abandoning, at a time, civil and peaceful conduct, he said in his brief statement, adding that his government did not have or want the argument of force. The Catalan Republic that was declared on Friday is not legal under current Spanish law. As well as removing Puigdemont's existing powers, Madrid has dissolved the Catalan parliament and declared independence and called new elections for December 21st, the earliest possible date. The region has been officially self-governing since its Statute of Autonomy was signed in 1979, as Spain returned to democracy following the death of dictator General Francisco Franco in 1975. Many of the thousands of supporters of independence who were weeping and celebrating in the streets of Barcelona and other towns on Friday pledged peaceful resistance to Madrid's orders, even before Puigdemont carefully worded calls for resistance. Activists have offered to form human chains around buildings to protect officials, some of whom are expected to face arrests and possible jail sentences for their role in both October referendum and the Declaration of Independence that followed. Think about that. They're saying, for having the temerity to take that vote, we're going to put you in prison. That's amazing. Some of the region's 200,000 civil servants have said they will not accept orders from Madrid, and one Catalan union has called for a 10-day strike starting tomorrow in support of the new republic, though larger groups have not joined them. Look, you've heard me make this argument once before that governments, the main power of governments is force. It's force. When these guys were going for the votes, they weren't talking. They were sending their goons in to beat the shit out of voters, people who were going in for the referendum vote. Now, if the main power of government is force, meaning armed forces, cops, they can beat you up, they can put you in prison, and ultimately they would stand on the side and say they were somehow justified because they were in authority to beat the shit out of you, to hurt you, and to injure you. If you were in New York, you could be pepper sprayed by cops, beaten by cops, killed by cops, and there would be no legal recourse for what they've done to you. Mind you, somebody may take them to court at some point, so that's not fully true. But ultimately, many of these cops, you may see something big and splashy of something that may take place. Oftentimes, cops abuse their authority left and right, no consequence. Were there consequences for the way they were beating voters in Catalonia when they were going to vote? The ultimate question is, what do you mean by peaceful resistance? And you honestly believe that if you're forming a human chain, they're not going to send those goons back down and beat the heads out of people who are in that quote-unquote peaceful resistance? At some point, that resistance is going to have to push back. Otherwise, you're not resisting anything. Now, understand this idea of peaceful resistance, but to what end? Like, how are you going to bring the levers of power to stop, to cease? I mean, if Catalonia says, we don't want to be taken over by Spain, fair enough. Then what are you going to do to not be taken over by Spain? They've just deposed you using their own legal construct. What are you going to do? Is your police force going to be a bulwark against their military? What are you going to do? How are you going to stop them from taking over direct rule? I understand this idea of peaceful resistance, but what does that mean? What does it tangibly mean? Does that mean strikes, meaning nobody's working in Catalonia, meaning 90% of the people who came out to vote for the referendum go on strike? Does that mean that those people are flooding the streets? Does that mean that those people are creating human chains where one person gets beat, somebody else takes their place? What does it mean? I'm curious to know what does it mean. If you're calling for an independence referendum and the state itself says no, and you say we're going to resist that the state is saying no, we're going to resist this with everything in us, you've created a standoff. Now one side is going to be broken. Either the state is going to be able to beat the shit out of you and get those people to fall in line, or you will not fall in line, and the state is going to have to exaggerate or use an exaggerated amount of force to try to get something done, which is going to cause a pushback in the society itself. If your society in Catalonia is willing to take the beatings of cops, is willing over and over again to come out and flood those streets and allow those people to get beat and hurt and injured, and have the government overreact to this referendum and to this resistance to the government's takeover, I don't think your path forward is force. I don't think you're going to win a force battle. I do think you may win a public relations battle if it looks like the government is being abusive and going over the top and trying to assert a certain amount of authority. Does that get you your independence? Or does that at the very least get you some kind of conversation about things that Catalonia may want, certain grievances? If you remember, Catalonia wanted to have the conversation. They wouldn't necessarily outright declare their independence. The president of Spain didn't want to have a conversation with him. The guy kept saying, we want to talk, we want to talk, we want to talk. And he looked at it as, are you independent or not? That's the only question we have. Are you independent or not? And they didn't want to answer the question of independence because they didn't necessarily want to kick in the legal framework of Spain. They didn't want Spain's response. Now, Spain's response has been, we're taking over. We're taking over. We're not going to have this back and forth with you on whether or not you're independent or not. We're taking over. The question becomes, what is Catalonia's response? Spain has showed its cards. What is Catalonia's response? Stay tuned. This is fascinating. Like, this is real time. All these people going to resist. And is this quote unquote peaceful resistance, this attempt at making this kind of normality, is it going to fall away the moment that those goons go in and start cracking heads? Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Alright guys, I'm going to end this here. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks guys. Oh, by the way, the article is at the bottom. Thanks.